Hi, I'm Maria Theoharous or Velo Sews on social media. Welcome back to this episode for Sober 50 on Sew Organised Style podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast on your podcast app and on YouTube.
So one of the things that I think sewists are doers, we like to do things. And when someone has chemo, first thing we thought was, well, we'll cook for her. But you can't cook for someone with chemo because their taste buds change. You don't know what they're going to like from day to day. Sometimes certain foods, you can put them off for life on their favorite food if they have it too often. So it was just, it was a certain food she can't eat anymore because it reminds her of chemo.
That's Sheila of Sheila Loves Fabric on Instagram. Now, this episode is not a medical episode. It's an episode born from care. When Sheila's daughter was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, sewing became one of the ways she could offer comfort and dignity during treatment. In this episode, Sheila talks about what she discovered, the garments that helped, the adjustments that mattered, and the things she would have loved to have known about earlier. Sheila's hope is that these insights will support others who are sewing for someone navigating cancer treatment, or that you might share this episode with someone who needs it. On another topic, if you live in Australia and decide to purchase your own Mimiquin, I'll be your body scanner. Go to mimiquins.com to book your scanning session. Now, let's grab a cuppa to hear Sheila's story. Sheila, thanks for coming onto the podcast today for Sew Organised Style and for Sober 50.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Maria. I really appreciate it. And it's always lovely to have a chat with you.
When you first came on the podcast, your Instagram name was different to what it is now. Can you talk us through the change?
Yeah. In the beginning, I was Sheila Sews Her Clothes. And believe it or not, that name took me like 6 tries to figure out. And it was a motivation because I was buying a lot of retail and I wanted to make just my own wardrobe. So I thought if I had that name, that would motivate me. And it did. So after about 2 years, I hadn't bought anything retail and my whole wardrobe was my own clothes. So I decided it was time for a different name that was more me. And it was a bit of a mouthful, frankly. So I was talking to Sue, my sewing buddy, and she said, what about Sheila Loves Fabric? And then I vetted it with my children who know all the, stuff. And they thought it was a good name. And it's a really good name for me because I love fabric. And a lot of my memories are about fabric, and I can remember where I bought it or where I wore what I wore here or there. And I buy a lot of fabric souvenirs. So I'm not going to change it again. This is
at
a good
the moment. Yeah.
Well, I have so much fabric that it also reminds me not to buy more fabric, but so it's just, it's a good name for me.
I really like it. And I also like the fact that you've said that you collect fabric souvenirs. So when you travel, you buy fabric.
And I would rather, buy fabric than go out to lunch when I travel or, I'm like, is the money better off spent here or here? A drink or a remnant? Pretty easy choice. Yeah.
Very easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know people buy T-shirts or they might buy a postcard.
Yeah.
Buy fabric.
Yeah. And then we wait until the right pattern comes along.
And that could be years down the track. Who knows?
Could be. Or decades.
Yes. Moving to what you've been doing a lot over the last 2 years.
Sure.
Is sewing for someone in your life who has cancer.
Yeah. Actually, I asked you to interview me about this, and I really appreciate it because at the time, I couldn't find any information. In 2023, my daughter was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was quite advanced and very overwhelming. And I'll first go a little bit into that. I wanted to say that she was 40 at the time. She was sick for about 6 months with lots of flus and stuff like that and cough and things. And we just couldn't figure out what was wrong. Her blood tests were normal. And her GP did a random chest x-ray. And it showed a mass in her, sort of around her chest and her heart, that was 15 centimeters or 6 inches long. And that is really big. So she got treatment on the more advanced end of chemo. I watched a doco recently, an Australian documentary that said there's been a 300% increase in certain cancers in young people between 20 and 40. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there that if, someone has a healthy person, she was a keen bushwalker. She'd done massive bushwalks. If someone who's really fit and healthy starts getting constantly sick, please get yourself checked out, because these cancers are being found very late because they're so young and you don't expect it.
No.
So we were quite shocked. She went through a very aggressive chemo treatment that knocked her for 6. We're now 2.5 years in, and she's just back to work part-time. So she's had a lot of side effects from the chemo. She ended up going into menopause after the chemo. So lots of life changes and lots of body changes, which is, sort of why I wanted to have this conversation, because I tried to find something. There's some really good interviews on people with cancer using cancer as sort of a therapy for their sewing, but I couldn't find anything on sewing for people who are going through this sort of cancer journey, particularly the chemo process.
For listeners and viewers who may not know, your background is also as a nurse. So the medical research that you do, or the stats that you put out, are things that you've gotten through your reading because of your work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And your interest as well.
Yeah, a very keen interest.
Very, very.
Yeah. And that's what you do. You read everything you can, and then you kind of stop a little bit because it all becomes too much.
For our listeners and viewers, we actually talked about this over 12 months ago as an episode, but I was more than happy to do this when you were ready and when we were both ready, because of all of the treatments and all of the stages that you were going through with your daughter to get to where we are today.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought I'd let people know.
I won't be emotional now.
No,
it's still a lot. Yeah. But it's good because she's just started getting better in the last 6 months. And so that's really good that we're talking now when she's, better. Whereas if we'd done it a year ago, she'd still be dealing with more and more side effects. And I think the hard part with chemo is you think it's going to be all over once the chemo's done. And for some people, it is a clear healing progression. But I don't know if it's because she had a more advanced form of chemotherapy with a lot of bad side effects, but it's been one after the other problems until about the 2-year mark. And so, and what that does is it's overwhelming and you're not prepared for it, but it also leaves you feeling very helpless. And I think I'll read from my notes.
Yeah, because you talked about how the sewing that you did for your daughter helped you at a time when you didn't feel like you could do much more than just support her.
Exactly. So one of the things that I think sewists are doers, we like to do things. And when someone has chemo, first thing we thought was, well, we'll cook for her, but you can't cook for someone with chemo because their taste buds change. You don't know what they're going to like from day to day. Sometimes certain foods, you can put them off for life on their favorite food if they have it too often. So it was just, there's a certain food she can't eat anymore because it reminds her of chemo. So my husband gardened for her, which was really beautiful. And I thought, what could I do? And then I thought, her clothing needs are going to change. I knew with chemo, most people think with chemo, you lose massive amounts of weight. And some people do, but a lot of people gain weight and they don't talk about that. But they gain significant weight. Certain chemo regimes have put you on a steroid called prednisolone. And anyone who's had asthma and been on prednisolone or any of those sort of things knows that it just, it changes a lot of things in your body, but it basically changes both your weight distribution and how rapidly you gain weight. So she had started her regime was large dose. She had chemo 3 days a week, and it was large doses of prednisolone. And she became extremely inactive right away, very sick. I thought about what kind of clothes would suit those kind of needs. So I learned that people with chemo often have very sensitive skin during treatment. And also we all know, of course, that it would burn easily. And they also suggest just even a little bit of exercise helps with your recovery. So the first thing we did was we thought about, well, she's going to go for a walk. She's going to go for walks. We took her for short walks, but she needed something that really covered her skin.
Yeah.
So we looked at hats. Now we ended up buying a hat, but if I was a couple of wide hats, but if I was going to make them, like Pattern Fantastic has that giant brim hat that is just fabulous.
Yeah.
And, LB Textiles, I think, has the Sorrento. Is it the Sorrento? One of them's much bigger than the other.
Yep.
There's the Freebie, used to be Freebie, and there's the other one. But she's got Serpentine. I don't know. Anyway, she's got some great hats. The first thing I made her was the assembly line oversized shirt. And it was perfect. It's perfect because it's a big shirt. I made it in linen, so it's nice on the skin. It rolls up. I added sleeve tabs to it. She found with the chemo, sometimes she'd be really, really hot. So she'd just need to quickly cool off. And also because of her age, she was 40, they put her on an injection that started menopause in order to preserve her ovaries. Okay. It wasn't actually successful, so she went into full menopause, but the whole time she had chemo and after, she had menopause symptoms. So she got a lot of hot flushes and things. So there were, a lot of things to consider. The LB Textile one, is the Serpentine hat, and that's got a wide brim. I also wanted to mention that their hair starts falling out pretty rapidly. Right. And one thing I did was I made her a silk pillowcase. And that was nice because their skin can be really sensitive. But the other one is the lovely Alexis Bailey. She has a turban pattern for a hat. Yeah. And I made that, and I took an old silk scarf and I lined the inside of it. And sometimes she wore that to sleep. Oh, and that's nice. A really lovely one. Yeah. It's really cozy. One thing I wanted to say about chemo is that, of course, everyone's experience will be a little different. For me, my daughter has always been very interested in style and clothing. And so for her, it was very important for me to consult her about what colors she liked to wear. Not so much the styles, because the styles were pretty consistent, but more about the colors. We would go through little swatches of fabric, and sometimes it would take her a whole week to decide on the color she wanted me to, sew. So it's kind of, they don't have much energy, and you have to be really patient with them at that time. In the beginning, she sat around with sweatshirts and leggings. And then more into her chemo, she found that her skin was so sensitive, she couldn't tolerate anything close to her skin. And also her stomach had a lot of bloating with the chemo. And I have read about this happening to other people. So the next thing I made her were the Robbie pants by Tessutis. First, she took a pair of my orange ones, which by the time she finished with them, they were really cleaning rags. And then I made her another one that was a little shorter and a lighter linen for when it was hot, and another one that was long all the way down in a heavier linen, the heavyweight linen. And that was for chemo days, because you can get quite cold. And I also made the waist really loose, because I guess if you're sewing for someone else with chemo, is to ask them, would they like a loose waist? Because mostly they do. It's just, they just want to be comfortable. One thing I found surprising was this assumption, which I've talked about before, about, I don't know if you would assume that, Maria, that people naturally lose weight with chemo.
That's kind of the stereotype.
It is. It is. But they have changed the way they do chemo now. So they put them on a lot of medications for the nausea. So there's not only the steroid she was on, but she was on these nausea medications, which also cause you to gain weight. She gained so much weight after her first couple to 2 weeks of chemo that they had to call the pharmacist to make sure it was okay to continue the treatment. So that's how rapid the weight gain was.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of women in particular, I guess men too, of course, just wouldn't be prepared for that. And it's
No.
not something they like to talk about because it freaks them out. So for me, I just wanted to make sure she always had clothes that fit, because
Yeah.
that's the main thing. She went up 3 sizes by the time she was finished. So I just wanted to make sure she always had a wardrobe in certain colors that made her feel, more like her.
When you're putting on the weight,
Yeah.
not without being going through treatment, that's as you know, that can be quite taxing on a person. But she was going through chemo as well, so it's like two
Yeah.
layers of
Oh, I know.
stress.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it was when someone you love is going through, care about is going through chemotherapy, there's all these emotions you have, this
Mm.
fear and worry and it's just over and it can't be about you because they're going through it.
Yeah.
But you need something for you. And that's what sewing was for me. It
Mm.
was this space where I could just, make something for her. But while I was doing the making, I was like in meditation, it was a mindful activity. They weren't complicated patterns. I
Mm.
could make them. I usually sew in silence. And it was like, if with sewing, if you start thinking about something else, you make a mistake. So it kind
Yes.
of trains your mind to concentrate. And it was just a really beautiful healing experience. And I think the person you interviewed who just wrote a book recently talked about
Yes.
the making and yeah, and that really resonated with me as it does for all people who sew.
Yeah. I think Nicole was good in documenting a lot of how making is part of our culture and also how it affects people. So I'm really glad that you got something out of that interview with her.
Yeah, I not enough to want to learn to knit, but enough to really appreciate it.
It's okay.
I talked a bit about, now I've talked about the chemo bloat and the sun sensitivity and the weight gain and menopause in some women. And there are a lot of women that will go into menopause at a certain age from chemo and chemo fatigue, which, isn't surprising. So whatever you're making for them, they're going to be sitting around the couch most of the time. One really interesting item of clothing that I already owned that was perfect for chemo was the Salma wrap by Style Arc.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's way better than a pashmina because it's no fiddling around. It's this kind of cape thing with holes for your arms. And so when you're having chemo, you get quite cold, but they need easy IV access. And she just wore that all the time. That was just, you know, best thing ever. Another thing I made her was because we started in winter with chemo and then we ended in summer. And then by the time she finished her chemo, she was still in menopause and she'd had developed these other health problems as well. So she was quite hot often. So the Lawrence top I made her, quite a few of those.
Mm.
And any of those would be, good. I think the Rise and Shine by Pattern Emporium, and any of those sleeveless kind of breezy tops. The Willow top by Grainline is a good one. Yeah, so anything that's in a lightweight, probably a linen or a natural cotton, but something that breathes and something that's soft. Really helped her cope with hot flashes. The
Mm.
other thing she had borrowed from me, but she found quite handy were the Tessudi's Tokyo jackets.
Oh,
They're
good.
kind of a little boxy one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had made a couple out of double gauze. And double gauze was just a great fabric because it's
Yeah.
so soft on the skin. So she wore those until, they really weren't even worth passing on. If they're a person that's really particular about what they like to wear, I would ask them. If they're a person that is uncomfortable with those kind of questions, I would just try to really look at their pictures and find out what kind of colors they wore and what their style is, and just try to give them something that sort of is in sympathy with that. Yeah.
Mm. For our listeners and our viewers, what advice would you give them about their approaching someone who is going through chemo and they want to do some sewing for them or knitting or any sort of craft? What's your
Yeah.
advice? How should they go about it?
Well, my advice would be that if you know what kind of cancer and treatment they're having, do a bit of research about the side effects.
Hmm.
Facebook has some good support groups, and the government has lots of really good information. You can search terms like hair loss, skin sensitivity, and weight to find out how common they are. Certain people are using something called cold hair. They use like ice packs on their head,
Oh, yeah.
minimalizes hair loss. But if you have a blood cancer like my daughter has, you can't have that. So that's kind of an interesting thing to know. I'd be also careful about how much you read, especially in the Facebook sites, because people tend to post a lot of things that don't work out, and then you can get sad. It's really important when you gather that information that you don't share it with that person. Just keep it to yourself, because they get so overwhelmed with advice from people that it's just really hard. And in the end, they just use their health professional, and they're very good about knowing how much information. When sewing for someone else, again, we said it's helpful to know what their usual style of dress is and what colors they wear. My daughter is very specific, so I always asked her when I explored a new shade and I ordered samples. Even samples would sometimes take her a whole week before she could, decide what she liked. But again, as we said, if I was making it for somebody else who maybe wasn't that specific, I would just try to be mindful of what they're like. I had a dear friend who lives in Denmark who had breast cancer, and I thought, oh, breast cancer. She's going to have, her chest is going to be so sensitive.
Mhm.
So I just tried to source the softest cotton for t-shirts for her. And she said that's all she wore. So it's kind of using your mind. I don't know anything about radiotherapy personally, but I know that the skin becomes quite sensitive. So it's keeping those things in mind when you think about what would be helpful to make for someone else. And
Okay.
keep in mind, they're going to do a lot of resting. So it's going to be clothes that need to be quite comfortable. Because knits are a funny thing to source. Sometimes it's really hard to source a good. I wanted her to have natural fibers. So,
Mhm.
that took a bit of digging around. Another point I'd make is I wouldn't mention weight to them because they'll be quite sensitive about it. I'd be mindful of the fact that it will happen. One of the things that I did for Miley is after she stopped the chemo, she was so immune suppressed that she didn't leave her house except to have treatment
Mm.
for 6 months. We didn't socialize for 6 months, obviously. So that's another thing that sewing sort of gave me, because I was, it's very isolating, and I do like to go and meet friends and have fun with them. But sewing was my therapy, really. It was my therapy. Yeah, it got me through it.
Mm.
Anyway, so when she was better, it was summer, and she wanted to wear something that made her feel good. And so the first thing I made her was the Barden. You remember the Barden dress by Peppermint Magazine?
Oh, yeah. You
Yeah,
made that.
I made her that. Yeah, real simple. We found fabric that, she liked. I think it was a fuchsia and white check. And because it's and I made a short version because she's young, but because it's a loose style,
Mm.
that's what I made her. A lot of loose things, but in really happy colors. And her friends were just beautiful. They'd say, "Oh, Miley, you look so good. Where'd you get that? Oh, your mom made it." It actually got her to appreciate my sewing a lot more. And she actually is now slowly starting to learn to sew, which is wonderful.
Oh, that's an added bonus.
I know, although she seems to be more of fabric collecting than sewing, but they're two
Look,
hobbies.
they're two hobbies. That's right. Keeps her happy.
What you see in the background is stuff I'm making for her, but she's slowly getting there. And she likes unpicking, which is good.
Yes. Oh, good on her.
I talked to my daughter, and she gave me a list, if that would be helpful, of things that she said she thinks would be nice for people to make.
Yep.
She said a tote bag to carry things to chemo. She said often she'd bring a water bottle, an iPad, a magazine, snacks, a notepad, and a layer for warmth. So a tote bag that would be big enough to accommodate that, she
Mhm.
said, would be a great gift. A silk pillowcase if hair loss is happening, which it does for most people,
Mm.
or at least thinning. A poncho or a cape for chemo, because she said that pashminas can be cumbersome with the tubes. And
Okay.
that was that Salma pattern I loved by Style Art, but you could find whatever you like. A hat with wide brim for sun protection, like we talked about,
Yep.
or turban if that's their thing. If you know them better, it was a long sleeve shirt, pants with an elastic waist, ideal, a loose elastic waist, loose tank style shirts, loose cardigans and double gauze, a sweatshirt or a jumper, and a soft French terry or cotton fleece. Consider soft, breathable, natural fibers such as linen, viscose, double gauze, cambric, or other softer cotton sateens and cotton knits. That's the list.
That's a really good list for anybody
Yeah.
who is thinking about sewing for someone who's going to go through chemo treatment or any sort of treatment, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's so helpful of her.
yeah. It was really sweet. Yeah.
So she's sort of passing it forward now.
She is. She is. Yeah. She was in a support group for a little while and she's yeah, and she's getting there. She's really great. Yeah. Huge appreciation for sewing now. Because she's always been a little glassy-eyed when I talked about sewing before and fabric. And now we actually went to Melbourne together and went in fabric stores. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Oh,
It was a bonding experience. But it's
good
great.
for you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I recently posted a whole bunch of these vacation vibe pants, and most of them are for her. She still, needs things with an elastic waist, and yeah, and her friends go, "Oh, did your mom make that?"
I was going to say it's good now that the
Yeah,
work that you've done to support your
yeah,
daughter through sewing is
yeah,
not just appreciated by her, but also for her friends as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
One of her friends went to some concert recently at Oasis, and
oh,
yeah, yeah, in England. And she had an old T-shirt that was like 20 years old, her brother's, and she asked me if I would change it to a crop T-shirt to look kind of cute. And I said, it was one of her best friends. She was amazing. I'm like, of course. It was thrilling, really. Yeah.
all roads lead to Sheila.
And the repair queen now.
There you go. That's really
Yeah, yeah.
great.
And also sew some for yourself. I still sewed for myself because I think if you sew for me, I can't just sew for others all the time.
No.
I need to sew for myself because when you're sewing for someone else, they're choosing what they want.
Mm.
Where when you're sewing for yourself, you get more of the creative process because you're the designer. That's always cool.
It is cool.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks. I hope there's something of what I babbled on about that's helpful to someone.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's not babble. You've come from a place that
Yeah.
is doing something for your daughter. You're
Mm.
using the skills and
Hmm.
your creativity for her
Mm.
and also for you. But
Mm.
you've also provided listeners and viewers with some really good advice based on also your background. So your medical background when you were
Mm.
doing that research
Mm.
is going to help other people
Mm.
find that information when they really need it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. And I think we as sewers, we do really do have a unique skill. It's not a real common skill. So it's something that we can do in a period of someone's life that's just so crucial to help.
It is. It
Mm.
is. It really is. And I'm just so pleased that you both have gotten to this point
Yeah.
where you're at a better place together as and
Yes.
even as a family. So thank
Yes.
you for sharing that with us today.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Thanks so much for this interview and chatting with you. And it's just been, as usual, lovely.
I'm happy to chat with you anytime because you've
Yeah,
always got lots of really good information and you're so much fun too.
Maria. I'm already looking at Sydney again.
Yay! This episode of Sew Organised Style podcast for Sober 50 was both video and audio produced by me, Maria Theoharous, in my sewing room. With permission of Sheila, sound by Kaneef on YouTube. Many thanks for the ongoing monthly support of the podcast Patreon contributors. Their paid Patreon membership enables me to create these video and audio podcasts for you for free. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps and on YouTube. And yes, if you live in Australia and decide to purchase your own Mimiquin, I'll be your body scanner for Mimiquins UK. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sew Over 50 episodes on Sew Organised Style podcast. And also, you can now tag your Instagram photos with @ShareSewOver50 to find all the Sew Over 50 sewers you've missed seeing since the tag search on Instagram went bust. I look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.